So let's talk about the three filters that are extremely important in NLP communication, which is deletion, distortion, and generalization. So the background here is that, as I had said earlier, a lot of information that comes to us, our mind puts those filters, and then we don't really get the whole message, or sometimes the message that we actually internalize was not the message that was intended. So the first one is deletion. So this is a big one. Our human brains have only that so much space, and we kind of have trained our brain to leave out some information so that the disk space in our heads doesn't get filled by all kinds of, too much information. We only have so much space, so we kind of economize and we take some of that information out. So deletion happens when we choose to overlook, or we've trained our brain in certain way that we don't really take all the information. And then especially our biases can come into action because we might know certain people who give way too much context, and your brain actually stops actually taking in any feed from them and starts at a certain point. So, we might actually delete some important information, especially when somebody says, I'm frustrated. And, sometimes a lot of things they say after that, we may not hear that. Or when people say things like, oh, there is a better way to do this, or people just don't listen to me. And that, there is a little bit of information that is coming in that you really don't want to internalize. So you just basically delete that information. But we just have to be careful of knowing what you're deleting and what you're not deleting, because you never know. There could be important, chunks of information that you could be deleting. The next is distortion. So what is distortion? So distortion really is where you have some bias in your mind, and you filter out what people are saying based on what your prejudices are. So we can twist our perceptions. An example is, couple of weeks ago, a colleague of mine was saying, I don't think my boss likes me. And I said, why do you think that? He says, my cube, is right in front of my boss's office. And whenever he's coming in or coming out, he never actually makes any eye contact with me. He's never said good morning or even greeted me. He just swings in and swings out. The only time he would talk to me is in a meeting. So I asked him, I said, so based on that, you're basically saying that your boss doesn't like you? He said, yeah. So I said, did you ever talk to him and bring this up? He said, no, I'm scared because he doesn't like me. So it turns out that, this particular person has so many different projects and programs that the person was managing. And, his style was that he doesn't do small talk. When he's coming into his office, either he's rushing to another meeting or coming out of another meeting to get some work done. So that's so much to do. And turns out that he actually really respects this particular team member, but just his way of expressing that never came across to, this colleague of mine. So he basically just thought that, my boss doesn't like me. So we just have to be careful how our brain is distorting that information. The last one is generalization. It is where, based on other experiences we've had, we just use one rule for multiple things. It may or may not apply. So look out for words like always, then they use words like never, everybody, nobody. Uh, for example, I used to hear that a lot in my office. Nobody ever makes coffee here. So basically, they were saying that whoever drank the last cup of coffee from the pot should have put in another fresh pot there. But this says nobody ever makes coffee. But there's actually always coffee there. It just happens sometimes that somebody forgot to put it or something like that happens. But you shouldn't be using the word nobody ever does that. And then there are other words that people use, like, for example, we must do that. I must finish this report today. And then there are so many presuppositions that, we just generalize things. And as we start paying more attention to some of these words or the way people are saying, and asking the right questions to understand a level deeper is one way of resolving this problem. Because otherwise, if people say things in a very generalized manner, especially in Agile teams, if you ask questions to understand deeper by asking sub questions, you can remove this particular filter of generalization and really helps you better.